My name is Evelyn Hartley, and I'm 68 years old. Most mornings I wake with the city already humming outside my Lincoln Park apartment. But today, the streets of Chicago were quieter, blanketed by the faint crunch of frost underfoot. Christmas was a week away, and I had promised myself I'd make this holiday perfect for Mara and Lucy, even if it had been a while since I felt truly appreciated. By 6:30, I was bundled in my warmest coat, hands tucked into gloves. Walking the few blocks to the farmer's market, I carried my canvas tote with care, envisioning each ingredient's place in the meal I'd planned. The bright red cranberries called to me from a stand, glistening like ornaments, and the pungent scent of fresh rosemary reminded me of every Christmas I'd spent in a warm kitchen, pots clanging, carols humming softly, while Lucy's little hands had tried to help, always in the wrong places. I paused at the stand selling specialty cheeses, picking out the sharpest cheddar Lucy loved. Even at her age, she still remembered those small details, the treats that made her eyes light up every holiday. I moved down the rows, selecting fresh vegetables, Brussels sprouts, and the plumpest yams I could find. My mind already calculating cooking times and roasting temperatures. Despite the comfort of tradition, a small weight pressed in my chest. Mara's subtle distance during past holidays lingered in memory the way she scrolled through her phone. Her curt nods, the sighs when I offered help. Still, I reminded myself of the love I carried for my granddaughter, the warmth of my own hands on the chopping board, the pride in preparing each dish with care. By the time I returned home, my tote brimming and my heart cautiously hopeful, the kitchen awaited. Tomorrow, I thought, it would all begin: the slicing, the roasting, the smells that filled the apartment with Christmas, and then I would see them, Mara and Lucy, gathered at the table. I approached Mara's townhouse, the brick facade frosted with morning ice, and paused for a moment to steady my nerves. The groceries in my tote shifted as I rang the doorbell. The chime echoed once before the door swung open. And there she was, Mara, eyes glued to her phone, fingers scrolling rapidly, completely unaware of my presence. "Hi, Mara," I said softly, forcing warmth into my voice. She didn't look up. Her thumb flicked, her gaze fixed on the screen, and she muttered something that could have been a greeting or not. Behind her, Derek leaned casually against the doorway frame. His eyes met mine briefly, just long enough for a curt nod, and then he stepped aside, motioning me in without a word. I stepped into the familiar apartment, my heart sinking slightly at the cold air that seemed to cling to their welcome. Only Lucy noticed me immediately. She sprinted across the living room, small feet patting on the hardwood, and threw her arms around my legs. "Grandma, you came. Did you bring the cookies?" Her bright eyes and uncontainable smile were a lifeline. I bent down to hug her tightly, inhaling the faint scent of peppermint from her sweater. Mara didn't stir from the couch, her attention still glued to her phone. Derek took a seat without acknowledging me further. The warmth of Lucy's hug contrasted sharply with the icy reception from the adults. I felt the familiar pang of being overlooked, a guest in my own family's home, yet I held on to the comfort of my granddaughter's affection. I followed Lucy toward the kitchen, my tote swinging at my side, and set it down with a soft thud. The routine awaited chopping, stirring, roasting, but this year, something felt different. I set the tote down on the counter and began unpacking the groceries, arranging the vegetables and meats in neat piles as if order could somehow smooth the edges of the tension in the room. Lucy perched on a stool nearby, chattering excitedly about the cookies we'd bake later, her enthusiasm a small island of light. Mara appeared in the kitchen, phone still in hand, and immediately scrutinized the ingredients. "Mom, you bought yellow bell peppers again," she said sharply. "Lucy doesn't eat yellow peppers. I've told you 100 times." I placed the peppers carefully on the cutting board and replied evenly. "The red ones were nearly $30 a pound. I thought this would be better for everyone." She huffed, scrolling through her phone, clearly uninterested in my explanation, and returned to the couch before I could begin chopping. Derek leaned against the counter, the fake ease in his stance irritating me. "Evelyn, maybe it's time you sold the house. You're too old to live alone, and we could help you invest the money." His smile was sharp, patronizing, as though he were offering me a favor while plotting to take it all. I chopped the vegetables slowly, letting my hands move almost mechanically while my mind cataloged everything: the dismissive gestures, the clipped comments, the way they always treated me like a caretaker rather than a mother or grandmother. I remembered each Sunday I had spent cooking, cleaning, and serving, and how easily they had taken it for granted. Lucy handed me a small note she had scribbled in school, beaming as she placed it beside the cutting board. Her innocent joy made the corners of my heart ache, but it also reminded me why I endured the subtle cruelty of the adults. I continued stirring the sauce, seasoning the roast, and placing pans into the oven, all while Derek lectured on taxes and hypothetical investment plans, as if I were a child who needed permission to live. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and roasting meat, warm and festive, but the atmosphere carried a heavy undertone of control and expectation. I didn't reply to Derek or Mara. Instead, I counted each insult and each demand silently, mentally preparing for the moment when patience would no longer be enough. I had just taken the roast out of the oven and set it on the counter when Mara finally stood, her phone abandoned on the sofa. Her face was flushed, eyes blazing, and before I could even greet her, she shouted, "You're not family. Get out." The words hit me with a force I'd never anticipated, slicing through the warmth of the kitchen like winter wind through Chicago streets. My hands froze over the carving knife, and for a heartbeat, I felt the sting of disbelief, but I didn't retreat. I didn't snap back. I let the words settle around me, letting their weight sink in while my mind worked. I remembered every Sunday I had spent chopping, stirring, and cleaning. Every dish served with love. Every smile offered to a family that had slowly come to expect it as entitlement. I felt the years of subtle dismissals, the rolled eyes, the sighs, the conversations where my opinions had been ignored. Each slight added up. And now it was all laid bare in Mara's furious declaration. Anger rose, but I did not let it spill outward. Instead, a quiet resolve filled me. This would not be a moment of reaction, but of action. I would not be controlled, belittled, or erased from my own life any longer. I inhaled slowly, letting the rich aroma of rosemary and roasting meat anchor me. My gaze fell on Lucy, sitting wide-eyed on her stool, confused and frightened. I saw in her face the small reminder of why I had endured all these slights. A strategy formed in my mind, sharp and deliberate. I would respond, but not with words of fury. I would reclaim control over my time, my home, and my resources. Every insult, every attempt to diminish me would be catalogued and turned into the foundation of my empowerment. Mara's voice continued to rise, accusing me of favoritism toward Lucy, of interfering, of being stubborn. I let her rant fill the room, while I gathered my thoughts and positioned myself for what must come next. My heart beat steadily. My hands no longer shook. The kitchen, warm and fragrant, was now a battlefield of intention. And I was ready. For the first time in years, I realized that patience had limits, and the moment had come to act. After Mara's outburst, I returned home with my mind racing. The warmth of my kitchen felt distant now, replaced by the cold clarity of necessity. I set my toad on the counter, unfolded my apron, and took a deep breath. It was time to act not out of anger, but with purpose. I called Helen, my oldest and most trusted friend, her voice warm and grounding on the other end of the line. "Helen, I need your help tomorrow," I said. She didn't hesitate. "Of course. Evelyn, whatever you need." The reassurance steadied me. I knew I wouldn't face this alone. Next, I gathered evidence receipts from the past several Sundays, documenting every ingredient purchased, every meal prepared, every hour spent in Mara's kitchen. I collected discrete photos of the dinners, the setups, and even moments when Mara and Derek were dismissive while I worked. Each document, each image became a tool, a quiet testament to my effort and their disregard. As I laid the papers on the dining table, I mentally rehearsed the confrontation. I imagined the calm tone I would use, the proof I would present, the firm boundaries I would set. Mara and Derek had always assumed I was pliable, willing to endure their whims. No longer. I pictured their expressions when they realized I had prepared thoroughly, each detail considered, each step deliberate. My heart beat steadily. The simmering frustration from earlier now refined into focus. I felt a quiet exhilaration, a sense of control I hadn't experienced in years. The kitchen smelled faintly of leftover rosemary and baked bread, grounding me in the ordinary while my mind charted the extraordinary. By the time I went to bed, the plan was clear. Tomorrow, I would no longer be the passive mother or grandmother. I would act, and this time, they would see exactly how serious I was. The next afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mara, impeccably dressed, and Derek carrying a laptop and a pink folder. Their smiles were practiced, polished, but I sensed the tension beneath, the urgency that betrayed their true intent. "Mom," Mara began, her voice sweet, "we have a business opportunity. We'd love for you to invest. It's a family venture, and we'd handle everything." Derek set the laptop on the counter and opened the folder, revealing charts and numbers that seemed, at first glance, well organized. I invited them in, offering a polite smile. "Show me what you've planned," I said, letting my calm tone mask the calculation in my mind. As Derek clicked through slides, I noted inconsistencies, numbers that didn't add up, assumptions that presumed I'd provide the capital without question. Mara's voice was sugary, persuasive. "It's only $150 and with our expertise, the return will be swift. You'd still have control. Mom, it's a safe, family investment." She leaned forward slightly, eyes shining, a mask of innocence over ambition. I stirred my tea slowly, nodding. "It does sound interesting. Tell me, have you checked the competition in that area?" My words were calm, but sharp. Derek faltered, glancing at Mara, trying to recover. "Well, it's a unique concept," he stammered. I let them continue, mentally cataloging every lie, every half-truth, every attempt at manipulation. I observed how Mara's hands trembled slightly when Derek corrected her, the subtle cues that betrayed their nerves. Every argument about profit projections and bank complications was noted. Every pressure tactic silently filed. "We'd love to have you as a partner," Mara pressed. "It's a family endeavor. We'd do this together." I nodded again, still smiling. "I appreciate that, truly. But before I make any decisions, I need all the details, documentation, and time to review everything with my lawyer. The disappointment flashed briefly across their faces. Then they masked it with practiced politeness. I realized then that this was the test, their audacity. Their assumption that I would bend. I remained composed, my mind already outlining how to turn their expectations into my advantage. Tomorrow, I would be ready. I waited until Mara and Derek arrived the next afternoon. Punctual as always. This time, I had Helen with me, and the dining room table was carefully arranged copies of receipts from past Sundays, photographs of meals, the notes I had taken during previous interactions, and a sealed envelope containing my updated will. "Mom, we're excited to show you the business plan," Mara said, holding her pink folder like a shield. Derek carried the laptop, placing it on the table with a soft click. I nodded politely, gesturing for them to sit. I poured a cup of tea and set it before me, savoring the warmth. "Before we discuss your plan," I began, voice calm but firm, "there are a few things I need you to see." I spread the receipts across the table. "Each Sunday, I have spent my time, my money, and my energy preparing these meals for you and Lucy." I tapped a stack of photos beside the papers. "These images show how I've been treated. You see me, Mara, not as your mother or Lucy's grandmother, but as a servant. Every dismissive glance, every insult, every expectation has been recorded." Mara shifted in her seat, her carefully practiced smile faltering. Derek cleared his throat, but I raised a hand, silently signaling that I was not finished. I opened the envelope, sliding the documents toward them. "This is my new will," I said. "Lucy will continue to receive her portion because she is innocent in all of this. Everything else, including the house, will be redirected to charitable organizations that respect me and the work I've done. Your inheritance, Mara, is no longer automatic." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Mara's jaw dropped. Derek's face paled as if he had been punched. I could see the shock in their eyes. The certainty that I would comply had been shattered. "I want you to understand," I continued, keeping my voice steady, "that respect is earned, not demanded. I have spent years waiting, hoping you would value me. That ends today. I am no longer at your disposal, and my decisions will be honored." Mara's lips quivered, and for a split second, vulnerability flashed across her face. Derek looked helpless, fumbling with the laptop as though it could rewrite reality. Lucy sat quietly, observing, her small hands clasped on her lap. She looked up at me, and I saw the reassurance reflected in her gaze. I leaned back, letting the weight of my words sink in. I was not yelling, not pleading, not threatening. I was asserting my life, my boundaries, my worth. And for the first time in years, the room was mine, not the way they wanted it to be, but the way it needed to be. The morning after the confrontation, my phone rang. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "I've been thinking about yesterday." I kept my voice calm, steady, and firm. "Mara, I heard you the first time. Apologies are only—" She hesitated, then whispered, I understand." I allowed the pow. And regarding Lucy, I continued, my tone gentle but unwavering. "She will spend time with you." Mara's sigh carried Rel. I hung up, feeling the tension in my chest ease slightly. I had said everything that needed saying. I didn't need to argue, justify, or plead my authority. Later that day, I organized Lucy's little notes, her drawings, and the small gifts she had left for me. I smiled softly as I placed them on the counter. Après. The house felt lighter, warmer, in the quiet of my autonomy. I moved through the kitchen, checking ingredients for the next meal, preparing not out of obligation, but choice. For the first time in years, I felt entirely in control of my home, my time, my heart, and my family interactions. The morning air along Lake Michigan was crisp and bright, carrying the faint scent of the frozen lake and evergreens from nearby Lincoln Park. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and took a deep breath, feeling the wind lift the tension that had weighed on me for years. For the first time in a long time, I walked without obligation, without expectation, entirely on my own terms. I greeted familiar faces along the path, neighbors bundled in coats, joggers nodding politely. But my attention was on the rhythm of my steps, the light bouncing off the water, and the freedom I had earned. Each stride felt deliberate, a small declaration of independence. Later, I arrived at the senior center where I volunteered. I spent the morning helping residents with basic technology, showing them how to send emails and video chat with loved ones. Mrs. Carmichael, an 82-year-old with sparkling eyes, laughed as she finally sent a message to her grandson. "You've changed my world, Evelyn," she said, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with connection. In the afternoon, I met Helen and 2 other friends for coffee. We laughed over shared memories, exchanged recipes, and planned our next weekend walk. Mara's criticism and Derek's pressure were absent from this space, replaced by respect, camaraderie, and genuine appreciation. Even my Christmas traditions had transformed. Instead of preparing elaborate meals for people who barely noticed, I baked cookies for Lucy and myself, hung decorations with a quiet smile, and played music I loved. I poured myself a cup of cocoa and settled near the window, watching snowflakes drift past, feeling the joy of choice and the calm of self-determined celebration. For the first time in decades, my days belonged to me. I could nurture my heart, my body, and my passions without compromise. The freedom was exhilarating, the joy authentic, and the sense of control entirely mine. Lucy's laughter over a simple cookie reminded me why I had endured so much, and why reclaiming this life, this autonomy, was worth every struggle. That evening, I settled into my favorite chair by the window, a cup of tea warming my hands, and watched the city lights flicker across the frozen streets of Lincoln Park. The quiet of the apartment felt different now, lighter, freer. I reflected on the past week's Mara's outburst, Derek's pressure, the confrontation with evidence and the updated will. Each moment had tested me, yet I had endured with patience, clarity, and resolve. I thought of Lucy, her bright laughter and eager eyes. She remained untouched by the conflict, a reminder of the unconditional love that had guided me through years of sacrifice. I realized that the lessons I had learned were not just about asserting boundaries, but about the value of dignity, self-respect, and intentional love. I could give without losing myself. I made mental notes for the future. Family interactions would happen on my terms, scheduled and controlled, ensuring respect and safety for both Lucy and myself. I would no longer allow manipulation or entitlement to dictate my life. Instead, I would guide with calm authority, showing love while upholding my worth. The holidays no longer felt like a minefield, but a space I could shape. I thought of the cookies Lucy had helped me bake, the music I chose to play, the simple rituals I had reclaimed for myself. Freedom and choice, I realized, were gifts I had earned, and joy was no longer something borrowed from others. It was fully mine. I set the tea aside and opened the notebook where I had written thoughts during the confrontation, reading the words that had carried me through. The empowerment I felt was quiet but profound. I had learned that boundaries could be loving, that respect could be demanded, and that my heart could hold love without being exploited. For the first time in decades, I felt complete, in control of my life, and fully capable of giving and receiving love on my own terms.